How's this?
I think it sounds good.
I tend to eat the mic, so I'll try to stay away.
When I was a kid and I first started singing, I would keep the mic like over here.
Yeah.
And my uncle's girlfriend at the time made buttons that said, Abby, eat the mic, to try to encourage me to eat the mic.
Wait, that's so cute.
I still have one.
Oh, wait, I love that.
I know.
I've been told to stop eating the mic pretty much forever. They're like, you're getting your lipstick on it.
Lay
like,
off. The worst is when you like hit your teeth.
Oh my God, all the time.
That's
all
so
the time.
embarrassing.
Yeah. I used to play a lot of like bar shows, like really dingy, empty bar shows.
Yep.
And I just remember constantly like walking up to the mic and the mic just smelling like gin or whiskey and being like, whose man's did this?
And I'm so excited to put my spit on there too.
Yeah, and I'd be like, you know what? Hell yeah.
Never been clean.
This is the vibe.
Hi, this is Ones to Watch Chef's Choice. I'm Abby Kenna, and today we're joined by King Mala.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I think this is my first time like podcasting like into a mic.
Oh,
with the headphones,
yes.
doing the whole thing.
We're contributing to, the destruction of society together. Today.
Yeah, I kind of love it. I'm a big like podcast consumer.
I am
so
too.
I feel really legit right now.
Everyone's like, damn, another podcaster. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Have you been listening to the telepathy tapes?
No.
Highly recommend. That's
What's
my new
that?
podcast obsession. It's this woman who's researching how nonverbal, like cases where nonverbal autistic children have like telepathic connections with their parents or like
I
the people
believe
around
that.
them. It's insane.
Wow.
It will like change your life. So good.
Oh.
Anyway, sorry.
Okay. No,
Sidebar.
I love that. I love to like choose a topic and learn everything about it.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so interesting and like eye-opening and kind of like beautiful and I don't know.
Especially
love it.
outside of music.
Yeah,
Because we
honestly.
consume too much. of
Honestly,
that.
I like don't listen to much music just in my day-to-day because
Yeah.
I'm sort of listening to it for like 12 hours a day anyway.
And
so
it's
I'm like,
your own.
I just
Yeah.
want to hear people yap. That's all I need. at the
That's
end
so
of the day.
true.
Yeah.
It's our social interaction.
Yeah, literally. I'm like,
Without-
I don't need friends. Right. Just need a podcast.
That's so bad.
Honestly, I mean, hey.
It's true. Well,
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being
Of
here.
course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to go through our little 3-course meal.
I know, me
of
too.
Music. And to start, I'd love to know if listeners had never heard your music before. What's the first song you would serve up to them?
So I think I'm like very, very in album world right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like this project is sort of the best representation of me as a person that I've ever released. And so
Yeah.
I would have to pick something from the album. And I feel like God is a really good starting point.
Yeah.
It was our first single release.
Mhm.
And it's because it was like in our brain, and by our, I mean like my production team, my people, all the, but it's sort of like a good bridge from what has been released to now.
Okay.
And yeah, I feel like that's a good like starting point.
You know you did it on purpose. Parade on all fours. I watch you whine at the sky so it hurts less. The dog at the door.
Like, yeah, you sort of know the vibe.
Yeah.
It's a dark pop baddie. It's sort of like classic. And then we like descend into freaky shit from there.
Yes, freaky shit, which I'm so excited to talk about.
Me too.
But tell me about God. What is the story there?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So the entire album is sort of like a power struggle between like a non-human entity and a person.
Okay.
And God is sort of the beginning point of our story where our like non-human entity tells our person what they're sort of in for if they
Whoa.
agree to the relationship. Yeah, it's sort of, I picture the story beginning with our like human begging God on their knees for power and our entity answering and being like, he's not going to do anything, but like I can if you want. And sort of that's sort of like where God starts. And then the rest of the album like descends into madness and is sort of like their relationship ebbing and flowing between chaos and like love and all these things.
Yeah.
Freaky shit.
I love that.
Yeah.
How did you dream of this storyline?
So I knew I wanted the first like official album to be conceptual in nature and to be like
Okay.
a story. And there was a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about that's like very personal and like actual sort of, you know, things I've been through in my life, but I wanted a vehicle to tell these stories and to talk about
Yeah.
this stuff. And I spent a lot of time talking with my executive producer, Dan, and he was like, what are you interrogating? Like, how are we going to tell the story? And I knew I wanted to be a conversation about power, and I wanted it to be very horror inspired as well, because that's sort of like my love, and I knew I wanted to go harder into that direction. And after like 15 hours of talking and microdosing some shrooms and kind of just like digging in, I was like, oh, I want it to be a possession story. I want it to be two characters, both representing like total opposite ends of the spectrum of power in my brain, and sort of how they interact with each other, and like what we as humans are willing to lose to achieve some like greater existence that we don't even really know exists or what it looks like. And sort of it was a lot of just yapping, honestly, and then
real light stuff,
light listening. But it's been really fun to have these characters as like a vehicle for all the stuff I want to talk about, like my relationship to God and to men and my body, and my relationship to being a woman and womanhood. And it's just been really fun to use them as sort of the little marionettes to play out the stories.
I mean, it makes perfect sense that like movie makers and writers and visual artists have these sort of vessels to explain, like metaphors.
Exactly.
And as songwriters, we are expected to be so vulnerable and like give the 100%. Full truth. But it feels very freeing to have that sort of metaphor to like tell the story.
Yeah, it was very freeing, and I think I gave it a real shot, like trying to be like really blunt and straightforward with my writing, like, oh, this is exactly what happened on this day with this person.
Right.
Because I love writers like that, and I really appreciate very straightforward writing. And it just never really clicked for me. And I realized with this project, especially, that I'm a very like narrative writer, and it works better for me. And I felt more like creatively free.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, all the options under the sun, like songwriters work in different ways, but I love having a character. It's so fun.
Okay. I love this. I don't hear about a concept album very often, so I will be picking your brain.
Yes, dude. And I could yap about this forever. Anyone who's talked to me about this is like, oh my God, she's bringing out the PowerPoint. Oh no.
Love. Remind me, is God the one that has the music video with two people and you're like in the desert? That's a different one.
That might be Fun. Everybody's a little bit in the desert.
It's in Fun. That's right.
It's in Fun, yeah. Okay. Fun, we're like running around. God is the one with the men on leashes and the dog.
Well, yes, how could I forget?
Super cash, super regular.
Well, tell me about those visuals. Are you doing all the same, like music video director? How is all that going on?
Yeah, so I've been working with my creative director, Marley Hall, who is like a genius and also a horror girly. Cool. But we conceptualized every single visual for every single song. There's at least a visualizer, if not a full music video, for every single song on the record. And a lot of them are references to our favorite horror movies, and specifically like God, for example, is a reference to this section at the end of the screenplay book for my favorite movie, which is The Witch.
Okay.
And there's sort of like the movie ends with Thomasin saying like yes to the devil and agreeing to be a witch, and she like gets naked, floats away. It's awesome. But at the end of the screenplay book, there's like this section that's sort of her yes and she sort of explains why yes and gives like shape to her desire, and she describes these 7 stories that she wants embroidered on a beautiful velvet cape for her to wear.
Whoa.
And one of the stories is the dog and his master, with the dog upright and his master on a leash, and that was the inspiration for God's music video.
Okay.
And then Fun was just like a found footage. We just wanted it to be crazy fun and like sort of descend into madness.
Yes.
So
that was the first one that I watched, was the Fun video. And one of the comments on it, I think it was like a top comment that said, this looks like the found footage from like a serial killer's past.
Exactly. That's the vibe.
Right. Dude. And it's very like foreboding and eerie, but also like, why am I connecting to these like serial killers with like bloody teeth in their hand? Like, what's going on?
No, it was really fun. I think it's always, and we're seeing a lot of it now, especially in horror, but seeing women sort of like lose their composure and like become the villain is so exciting. I think we've watched men murder women in media for a really long time.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, it's super fun, super constant.
Yeah.
And to watch women sort of like lose their sense of humanity and become like that monster. I really enjoy it. You know, The Substance and Strange Darling and all the Final Girl sort of. Dude, I know, right?
I know, like on behalf of Giselle right now, who is the biggest horror consumer.
Really? Period.
Her partner is an amazing horror writer. They do a lot of...
We have to chat.
Yeah.
We have to chat.
What are some of your favorite horror films?
Oh, well, my favorite movie ever, The Witch. I'm obsessed with it.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like this year has been really good for horror. Loved Nosferatu, same director, same sort of concept of like taking like female desire and turning it into like this like creepy foreboding story. Obsessed with that. I don't know. I love Blair Witch Project. I'm obsessed with this movie called The Ritual. It's like a Netflix original. I think it's based on a book, but it's one of my favorite horror films. Has my favorite horror scream of all. Obsessed with The Substance. I don't know. There's a lot. I've sort of consumed like every horror movie there is to consume.
Wow.
But I'm a really big fan of like dread and sort of like creepy, slow moving, slow burn horror. I loved First Omen, loved Saint Maud. I don't know. There's so many. Obviously, a big fan of Midsommar, Hereditary.
Sure.
But Was Afraid made me upset, but I think that was the point, so I respect it. It was one of those movies that I watched and I was like, I hated that. And then you like read about it and you're like, oh, period.
Well,
that was the point.
Yeah.
But it was awesome, obviously.
Wow.
But yeah.
Okay. This is giving me so much context for the album too, because I feel like there are a lot of moments where it's like instrumentals that are sort of building that tension and the dread and then like hitting you with like jump scare stuff. Like, I'm thinking about Ode to a Black Hole.
Exactly. That's that was like one, especially at the end, there's sort of this like jump scare moment and you're like, oh my God, it's literally like horror pacing. Like there's sort of the moment you think it's over and then there's like a flash of like, there's light in their eyes or their finger moves and it's like, oh, the sequel is on its way. It's sort of like that. Perfect. I love a cheesy horror. I feel like horror is really good at not taking itself too seriously a lot of times. And that was sort of a nod to that.
Wow.
But, yeah.
Okay. Amazing context. Given all of that, I would love to know like what song is the meat of this album?
Honestly, I feel like Ode has to be.
Cool.
Yeah, I was thinking about it because I knew this was sort of the concept of the podcast, and I was like, Ode is definitely like it's literally we call it our opus. It's like our sort of moment of giving everything we have to one song. When we wrote it, we wrote it all in one day, and sort of like we were like, oh my God, what is this song? It feels like sort of a journey from like this like slow like pacing like dread. It's sort of where both of our characters are at their like most heightened state, and then it descends into madness and also has a million layers of like live strings and live vocals. I had a bunch of my artist friends come in and do like a whole choir for it and do the odes with me.
That's
and
cool.
I do feel like it is my most like accurate artistic representation of like what I do as a person and as a musician thus far. And it's a freak. I love it. I feel like it's unexpected. It sort of gives you what you think you want and then takes you in another direction. And it's so loud. It's so intense. Like mixing that song was so difficult because we brought it to mixing and we were like, it's about as loud as it gets. And we would like you to make it louder. And our mixer was like, what? And then we have to take it to mastering and they're like, oh my God, it's already so loud. And we're like, yeah, but louder. We wanted to freak people out. Like we wanted to be huge. But yeah, that's definitely to me like a really good representation of the album overall. And honestly, like this project overall, I feel like it's been my like touchstone for a lot of stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how you go about writing for this sort of thing, like because it's a concept and you have this storyline, but then you are trying to write within these small moments and songs. Are you doing like lyrics first? Are you doing the production first? Is it all happening at the same time?
Honestly, it all happens at once, but we wrote the plot of the album months before we started writing the actual music, and it follows like the hero's journey, 12 steps.
Okay.
So we had like the pacing and the sort of like beats for the story that we knew we wanted to follow. And then within that constraint, we sort of let ourselves like, what if it was this? What if it was that? What if this moment is from this perspective and we're talking about this? And for Ode specifically, like I went in that day and I was like, I want to write a love song to our entity, like from our human, and sort of make it like a love letter to the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Because when you're still in it, you know it's killing you and you know it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
But you still can't separate yourself from it, and you can't like leave yet. You can't, you know the truth, but you can't accept it quite yet. There's like this sort of in between of like, I know I have to leave. And the leaving, there's like this big gap in between that I don't feel like I hear about very often. And often there's a lot of like shame around it, especially in like a toxic relationship, which a lot of these songs sort of emulate. There's this moment where you're like, oh, this is horrible for me. All of my friends hate this person. My family hates this person. Everyone's telling me to leave, but I can't yet. Yeah. And I see that happen with so many of my friends. It's happened to me. And I wanted this song to sort of emulate that, like this sort of like enormous feeling of I still love you, but you're tearing me apart. And so I said like, oh, like it's like an ode to the worst thing that's ever happened. It's like an ode to a black hole. And my producer, who's a big like sci-fi science nerd, was like, it has to be that. It literally has to be that. And I was like, okay, period. Let's do it. Period. Yes.
Wow. It's kind of like writing a musical.
honestly, it's like it's really fun to like go like to sort of decide the pacing of a project before you even like go at the music, and then everything like flows so naturally from there. At least for me and like my team, we were all sort of like operating on the same level of, okay, well, we know our characters, we know what they're going through, we want to write this moment, we're missing this moment, or like we want to start here, or we think it would be really interesting to explore this point of the story from this perspective. Like from there you have everything and you just sort of let it flow. It's so sick. It was so fun.
Wow. It sounds like a really like I mean, we're all creating always, and this is not like a knock to like regular session culture and just like sort of writing non-conceptually, but it feels amazing to have like an intention and to go in and to complete that.
Honestly, you should have seen like when a lot of times we brought writers in, we brought friends in, we would take this project to like other producers and sort of just like we wanted to see like who fit and who was down, and people were so fucking stoked when we told them what we were doing. They were like, oh my god, like let's pop off. I think a lot of times like session culture, which I did like the sort of like speed dating, like constant sessions with new people, and you sort of like write the feeling of the room or you write about the conversation you're having. I feel like a lot of times that's like very hit or miss. Either like you nail it and it's really fun, or you're sort of grasping at like nothing because there's no sort of like
there's no
foundation to start off of. And when we were like, we have a story, we have a PowerPoint, we have a mood board, we have everything, we have our characters, like we know what they're doing, we know what we're writing, everyone was like, okay, period. And like absolutely popped off, and everyone was so excited to like have sort of a foundation to work off of. It was very sick. It was very fun to see like other creative people like get into the story and get into these characters. It was like very fun for me. I was like, this is just a little story. I just sing these little songs, and everyone's like into it. It's so fun.
Yeah, because it's a task. Like to set a challenge in front of a songwriter. I think anyone would be stoked.
Exactly. Honestly, it was really, really cool. And I think we intentionally picked a lot of writers that are like real freaks, and we were like, we want you to be your freakiest self, and they were like, of course, on it.
Easy.
So sick. It was so fun.
Oh my god. Well, I'd also love to hear about like some of the sonic influences and like inspirations. Any other artists you were like listening to a lot at the time of making it?
I think we had like two sort of album like North Stars. One was 22 a Million, Bon Iver, which obvious not to be basic, but we were like, that album sonically is like so beautiful and experimental and like massive, while not like being, I don't know, like heavy-handed. And then we sort of took that and we were listening to like a lot of like hip hop and a lot of different, I didn't want to lean too hard into like a rock sort of influence, although I do love it. I wanted this album to sit somewhere between like experimental pop and like R&B and soul, which is sort of where I come from.
Yeah.
And yeah, so 22 Million was sort of our like experimental section, and we were listening to things like The Roots and like Little Sims that record was like really big for us at the time.
Nice.
And I'm a big fan of artists like Ethel Cain and Phoebe Bridgers, and sort of like more like washy, reverbed out conceptual records. But yeah, I don't know. It was sort of a giant mix of stuff. We were listening to like Charlie XCX and Arca, and yeah, I don't know. It was kind of all over the place.
No, those are
Artistic
sick.
way. Yeah.
It honestly all makes sense. Like you can pick those little influences out.
Yeah, Phanogram was a big one as well. We have like a whole album playlist.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a ton of stuff.
Okay, amazing. Well, for our third song, I'd love to hear about like the freakiest, your personal favorite.
Yeah.
What is your like cherry on top song for the album?
Yeah.
One or two. Yeah.
I honestly feel like for me, Devotion is like the reward a little bit. It's like, I just think she's like so sexy and fun and cheeky, and like the song doesn't take itself too seriously while like fucking with very serious topics.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorites to write ever, and I think for me like that hook is sort of a reward of like you're having to do all of this heavy like metaphor work and all of this like sort of deep thinking big concept, and I love that hook is just like anything for love, bitch, anything. It's sort of like a classic. We were trying to go for like a classic pop like R&B moment.
And I would learn to speak in tongues. I paint my nails and pop my gum, my rosary, my push-up. I would do anything for love.
But yeah, that song for me is like the reward for all the like heavy work you have to do for the album.
Yeah.
That and Little Death, those two are like just two little bops. They go hand in hand. They're both just like fun and sexy. They're both similar moments to each other, but from different perspectives. So Little Death is our entity being like, oh my God, having a body is tight. I love having a body. I love eating food. I love like sex and drugs and all of the things that you get to experience like as a human being that I feel like an immortal entity would miss.
Right.
Especially like a slightly amoral sort of entity. And then Devotion is our human being like, oh my God, being totally devoted to this ultimate power is sick as hell. I love it here. This is so nice. I would do anything to keep feeling like this.
Yeah.
Sort of like the height, and it's like the peak of the trip. But yeah, both of those I feel like are a fun reward for all of the heavy shit.
Those are cool perspectives.
Yeah.
How does the story end? If you have a clear ending. I don't know if it's up for interpretation.
It's definitely like the entire album is meant to sort of emulate like a cycle. For me, it's the cycle of violence. Like our entity in the first song sort of introduces like what she is and why, and she is a consequence of the violence of men. And so violence begets violence, and she enacts violence on the next. And then throughout our story, our entity sort of takes everything she can and wants to, as she is wont to do, from our human. And at the end, our human sort of realizes that they were never going to achieve this like perfect power that they wanted. And in fact, they're left like a shell of who they once were. And from there, like, I imagine our human goes on to enact a similar experience onto something else or someone else. And the story ends with our human being like, I may have survived this and I may like have lived to tell the tale, but I will never be the same. I'm actually an entirely different thing than I was at the beginning of this story.
Whoa.
And then the end of the last song loops perfectly to the beginning of the first one. Oh. And so it's sort of this like descent from one entity into becoming another, and thus the cycle repeats.
My God, endless cycle.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That
the
is
snake eating itself. cycle of violence.
God, perfect. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
This, I can't even imagine like what your Pinterest boards and stuff must look like.
It's crazy. We have a Milanote, highly recommend, especially for the corporate girlies, that is actually psychotic. It's crazy. Wow. I've shown it to Jenny. I think it was probably like a 2-hour long meeting where I was like, okay, I lit a candle. I had the projector. I was like, this is what we're doing. But yeah, it's bonkers, honestly. Really fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, congrats. That's amazing that it's like done and it's going to come out.
Yeah, I'm very stoked.
That's a huge labor of love.
Yes, so. Honestly, it has been the most like creatively fulfilling and like so much work, but has never felt like work at any point. It's honestly like, I've been waiting to do this for so long.
Oh, yeah, amazing. I have 3 final questions for you then. Cool. My first one is that if your music were a candle, what would it smell like? Also, name drop the album because it's a long name and I don't want to butcher it.
No, it's a long name. It's And You Who Drowned in the Grief of a Golden Thing.
Yes.
The candle.
The candle of such.
Oh my God. I feel like it would be like warm and spicy and a little sweet. I think it would smell like a lot like dragon's blood incense.
Okay.
Like, kind of spicy and intense and like gives the aura of like a psychic's sort of back closet. That's what I imagine it smells like.
Yeah.
I think.
Because I know that smell.
I know that smell.
I'd also love to know what your favorite sound is right now, but like a life sound.
Oh my God. You know, I have a favorite sound of all time. And it is, I guess it's technically music, but it's like when an orchestra is all tuning to the same note. That's my favorite sound of all time in life.
Yeah.
You just hear them all like slowly come into like that C. Oh, so
feels like something is gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But non-musical, I'm really obsessed with the sound in New York specifically when the subways like leave. There's sort of this like and then they go. I love that sound.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, honestly, it's really like it's so pretty. I want to like sample it at some point, but it's a very specific note, and it's only in New York. I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. My last question is who your ones to watch are.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So who are you listening to that we should?
It's so funny because I've been listening to her for a while, but Lola Young was like, I was like, guys, you have to check out Lola Young. But now everyone's hip to that. But she's so good. I think for me, I recently discovered this girl, Sydney Rose. I really love her music. I've been listening to it a lot. And I'm trying to think of like a cool up and coming artist. I have so many friends that are incredible. Devin again, obsessed with her.
Of course.
I have my friend Desi has really incredible music, is an incredible writer, wrote on this project with me. And one of my favorite writers are like Queen Freak. Her name is Cara Salamando and her project is called Bunny Low. She's so rad. The producer that produced my album is working on her record with her right now. But all of her music is so sick. All of her visuals are so sick. She's really cool. So I think she's like a perfect like one to watch. She's definitely like deserves way more hype.
Okay, I'm not familiar with her, so
she's so cool.
It's my homework.
Yes, that's the homework.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, once again, this is Ones to Watch Chef's Choice. I'm Abby, and this is King Mala.
Thanks. Bye.